Where does consciousness go after a person dies? Does it completely vanish? Or does it continue to exist in some form? This video is a bit intriguing. Let's approach this age-old mystery from a completely new perspective. People usually think that once a person dies, consciousness dissipates, and they fall into eternal darkness. But in reality, there might be some misunderstandings involved. For example, everyone has to experience deeply dreamless sleep, during which there are several hours of blank consciousness. But the crucial point is that we cannot perceive this blank period. After upon waking, that period of blank consciousness feels as if it never existed. Similarly, people who have undergone general anesthesia will have a similar experience. During the surgery, those few hours of blank consciousness will not remain in memory. Thus, it is evident that the state of no consciousness is something we cannot personally experience. Consequently, the idea that after death one falls into eternal nothingness. Logically, there is a contradiction. Because when we imagine ourselves being still in the darkness, we have already violated this logic. As mentioned earlier, the few hours of general anesthesia and the time of deep, dreamless sleep are periods of blank consciousness for us. However, our consciousness is able to bridge these gaps, smoothly connecting previous memories with post-waking experiences. It is this continuity that makes our consciousness like an uninterrupted thread. From this perspective, death can also be viewed as a blank in consciousness, but fundamentally different from dreamless sleep and general anesthesia. That is, the blank period of death can never be reconnected, and the continuity of consciousness will terminate due to death. So, is the blank consciousness brought about by death really insurmountable? Does the continuity of consciousness really terminate because of death? There is currently no clear and final scientific explanation for these questions, but we can understand them through some new avenues of thought. Relevant researchers abroad have proposed a philosophical thought experiment. Let's imagine a world with very advanced medical technology, where a cutting-edge technique called life design has been invented. This technology can perform any complex modification to a person's brain and body, even designing personality and memory according to people's wishes. However, during the surgery, consciousness will temporarily fall into a blank period due to general anesthesia. Based on this background, let's imagine a small story. There is a person named Xiao Shuai, who feels deeply disappointed with his previous life. So he decides to undergo the life design surgery. The doctor modified Xiao Shuai's body to be stronger and his appearance to be more handsome, according to his wishes. A few days later, the surgery ended, and Xiao Shuai woke up from the general anesthesia. At this point, he possessed the body he had always dreamed of and could begin a completely new life. In this process, Xiao Shuai bridged the blank consciousness period of the general anesthesia, and the continuity of his consciousness was not broken. After a period, Xiao Shuai gradually felt unsatisfied again in his new life. So he decided to undergo a more drastic modification. This time, he even requested a complete change of his personality and memories. Then, after general anesthesia and several days of surgery, when he woke up again, Xiao Shuai now had a different personality and newly rewritten memories. It can be said that he has completely transformed into another person. He gave himself a new name, Zhen de Shuai. Zhen de Shuai, with a brand new personality and memories, also began his new life. So at this point, how should we interpret what happened to Xiao Shuai? His body and personality have changed drastically, so can we say that Xiao Shuai has become another person? Even if he has become another person, can we say that Xiao Shuai has died? If viewed from the perspective of the continuity of consciousness, the consciousness before the surgery and the consciousness after the surgery are interconnected. So Xiao Shuai did not die, even if his body, personality, and memories are completely different. As long as the continuity of consciousness is preserved, we cannot say that the original Xiao Shuai has died. Here, it should be emphasized that consciousness is not solely memory, but also includes perception, self-awareness, emotions, and experience, while memory is only a part of consciousness. Before discussing the view of whether consciousness vanishes due to death, there is another key point. Does the existence of consciousness really depend on the brain and body? If consciousness relies on the brain and body to exist, then when the body dies, consciousness will also disappear. Next, we can change our thinking and analyze this question from the perspective of string theory. String theory suggests that the world we live in is not just three-dimensional as we previously thought, but very likely consists of up to 11 dimensions of space. In other words, this means that higher dimensional worlds that we cannot perceive may exist. Although string theory is currently only at the stage of theory and hypothesis, this is because with existing technological means, we are not yet able to detect worlds beyond 3 dimensions. Moreover, string theory itself exhibits high mathematical self-consistency. So it can be said that, theoretically, there is a possibility of worlds with dimensions higher than our 3-dimensional world, which also offers another possibility for the hypothesis that consciousness does not rely on the brain and body to exist. Nobel laureate in physics, Roger Penrose, proposed an interesting quantum brain theory in his 1994 book, The Emperor's New Mind, which aims to explain what human consciousness truly is. Penrose believes that consciousness is not fixed at a specific location or time, but has the magical property of being able to exist simultaneously in various states. This means that consciousness is a special existence that transcends ordinary physical laws, and is not necessarily limited by the brain and body. Although Penrose did not specifically mention which space consciousness exists in, if combined with string theory, the possibility of consciousness existing in a higher dimensional world is worth considering. In other words, after a person dies, their consciousness may still continue to exist in other forms. On the other hand, there is also a theory that consciousness after death may move to a 2-dimensional world, lower than 3 dimensions, which is called the holographic universe theory. Simply put, just like the screen of the smartphone in our hands, although it is a 2-dimensional plane, it can display stereoscopic 3D images. This theory speculates that the universe we are in may also have a similar structure. That is, the 3-dimensional world with height, temperature, and length that we experience in daily life may actually be an image or something similar created by the 2-dimensional world. Based on this view, consciousness after death may return to the 2-dimensional world that created everything. Whether it is the theory of a higher dimensional world or a lower dimensional world, they both have one common point, which is the assumption that human consciousness may not be created by the brain, but is a fundamental attribute inherent to the universe itself. This means that consciousness may not be bound by our body and physical laws, but exists in a deeper dimension. Furthermore, near-death experiences also provide relevant explanations for consciousness. Sam Parnia, a renowned medical expert at the New York University Medical Center, has mentioned relevant cases. Some patients in a near-death state, the body in a clinical death state, were able to accurately describe things that were physically impossible to see, such as themselves in the room, the nurse's face outside the room, the ceiling of the ward, and the shape and color of placed objects, all of which they could recall after their consciousness recovered. This means that the consciousness of these people was able to observe the surrounding environment without relying on the body's senses. Of course, there is also an explanation that this is what consciousness experiences on its way to leaving the body for another dimension. But nonetheless, these theories imply the possibility that consciousness may exist independently of the brain and body. So, my personal understanding is that, after a person dies, their consciousness has a minimal probability of not disappearing, but existing in some form in other dimensions, or transforming into a kind of unknown information energy and integrating into the overall structure of the universe. Of course, this view is limited to my personal understanding, and does not apply to any scientific viewpoint. This hypothetical view that consciousness does not disappear might bring a certain degree of comfort to some people. If we can truly exist eternally as consciousness, it means that the essence of life may far exceed our understanding of the material world. Death will no longer be the end, but a transformation or continuation of the form of consciousness, which will have many profound philosophical and scientific implications. If we think even more boldly, we usually assume that the universe existed first, and then life was born within it. So is there a possibility that life created the universe? Or rather, that consciousness created the universe? It may sound difficult to grasp at first, but if we consider that all things, including concepts like time and space, are created by our consciousness, then many things can be explained in unexpected ways. Regarding whether consciousness disappears after death, current scientific methods cannot directly prove or disprove the existence of consciousness after death, but it is important to specifically remind that the above content is only a discussion based on some theories and hypotheses. I hope everyone will approach these views with an open mind, believing that in the future, we can all get the answers.